I have no other liaison reports.
Okay, that's great. Any other reports? It's interesting. I'm probably looking at a different version of this.
Yes, I think that it was changed Tuesday afternoon,
Okay.
very briefly, yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I
Okay.
think we have policy working group and then,
Okay, then the next items, all right. So the next item on the agenda under new business is the policy working group. I had mentioned this briefly last time when we met, is that from a timing perspective, it was becoming a challenge for me, especially on Fridays. It's a little hard, and, it's not always easy to get that all scheduled. It's only 3 members. It was just Dr. Kavanaugh, myself, and Jen in the working group for the policy. And I think it's such an important aspect of what we do as a school committee. That's one of the things that sets what needs to be done. And I think having voices is important, and I was feeling very guilty that I could not make it last time. So that is the reason why I am requesting this. But before I make this request, I also want to throw a suggestion out there, which I had also mentioned at the last meeting, is policy is such an important aspect, and I know we have a process. I would really like the working group to consider that it become a subcommittee under the school committee, so that we give an opportunity not just for the working group, but to allow the community to participate in the process, to hear what is the thought process that goes in. In the very short time that I was on the policy working group, I thought there's so much thorough work that goes on behind the scenes. We look at other districts, what's going on. You look at MSC, there are even the may and the, shall, should, would, could, the same kind of conversations that I think they should become so important. And it's not at the moment very clear to the community that they can't see it all or participate in all of this. And I know it's an overhead that you have to do minutes, you have to post, you have to know all of this ahead of time. And after all you do, maybe no one will come to the subcommittee meetings. But that's my real desire too. I know I'm requesting 2 things here, trying to get out and saying, hey, here you go, consider it. So, go ahead, Nancy.
I do think that adds a layer of transparency, even if nobody comes. It does allow I don't have any objection or not that.
Right.
I have no objection. I think it's, like you said, it's transparency. I think the tricky thing, like you said, is, it's already hard to coordinate schedules during the daytime, and I feel like if we do this and post and go through that whole process, which I'm happy to do, if no one comes on a consistent basis, it's like jumping through hoops for a purpose that may or may not be, there may not be a reason for it. So, if we did this and we decided that we wanted to undo it, is there a process for that? Does anyone know?
Subcommittees get retired. I think we would have to vote on retiring it, right?
I think so, right?
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know what the composition of a subcommittee would be. I do know, just scheduling the website subcommittee, it's very hard to get, especially if we want community members. Many, if not most of them work, and, if it's just the 3 of us but changing the administrative side.
That's right.
Then that, I don't know, that'd be easier. If we make the composition much bigger, it's even harder. People.
Oh yeah. I don't know that I'd want the composition to be bigger.
If the composition's not being changed, really the only things that would be different would be posting the agenda
That's
within
exactly
48
what I was
hours
thinking.
and posting the minutes. That's not.
Yeah.
Right. Just opening it up to public to come and be part of it if they so desire, right? Be part of the process, and that also allows you to invite people in if needed. And they can come in and participate if needed. Again, the whole thought for me was coming from the fact that the process can, if we include more voices, more experiences, it helps. And when I was not there, I felt the burden that it's not giving that another layer, another voice in the process where there is a possibility. That's all where it's coming from. But having said that, that's not what I was looking for here. I'm looking to step back from this. And I also would encourage that, if there is anyone on the team here who feels underutilized, I think there's so much to do. We have, 25 plus subcommittees and liaison roles. If anyone is feeling underutilized, you could participate in this or anything else that we have. Or if you're feeling overburdened, we could talk about that too.
I probably have the fewest subcommittee assignments, so I do feel like I would do that, or I would swap out with something else for somebody, if that would be just in terms of, I don't have a lot of the things I did last year shifted around this year. Just by nature, I have a little bit of guilt over that. I don't want to be seen as the weak link.
No, not at all. Not at all, Nancy. I don't think that. I think we all pitch in here. We all work very hard. As the very unpaid volunteers, if I may highlight just for a little bit.
We get, 10 times our salary every year.
Of course we do. Of course we do. And the satisfaction that you get, certainly.
So you want to step down. You mentioned that you would want to step in. No pressure. I'm not saying, hey, do you want to do it?
I enjoy the work.
But you
I'd be
would
happy to do
suggest
it.
And not to take away from you, Nancy, because I'd love for you to come on too, but I mean, just, you can fight over it. You can, rock, paper, scissors for it.
I got to do it last year, so.
You did a very nice job with it.
Well, I don't know about that, but
You did?
I will say,
nice shorts and stuff.
I think the AEDs that came forward were actually an out
They absolutely were, yes.
result of.
I also would be willing, if there's something you want off your plate, we can discuss that at a future date. Like, I don't have anything particular to this thing, but I also feel like, I don't want you to feel like your list is growing more than.
I kind of feel like you. I think my last year was a lot busier than my this year because the website stuff. So we're kind of in the same boat. But if you want to have a rotation throughout, you did it a few years ago. You can come back and do it. Or
happy to.
Okay.
All right, you guys fight about it. I'm going to go to water.
That was easy.
If you want to do it.
I'm happy to do it.
All right, so we're deciding on Amanda?
I think we have.
Okay, that's great. In the past, we have done motions for the composition of the working groups and, the liaisons. So I'm looking for a motion to replace me with Amanda on the policy working group.
So moved.
Second.
So motion by Nancy, second by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm aye as well, and so that carries. We move on to old business, designer selection board. Ms. Rothermick.
Thank you. So as a result of town meeting, as you know, we'll be putting out several contracts. So I'll be putting out a couple next week. For the design engineering for the high school, we have to follow that designer selection law, which means that we need to use that designer selection board, and we bypass the thresholds that allow the school committee to do it. So we have to go before the Board of Selectmen and see if they will delegate that authority to the school committee.
Ms. Rothermick, I recall doing this over the summer, right, for a different reason.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, last time, the process in terms of requesting to get on their agenda, do you need any support there, or is that something
You would need to make this vote to ask the Board of Selectmen to delegate that authority to you.
Okay.
And then we need to get on a Board of Selectmen agenda.
Okay, and that part you are going to take care?
I can.
Okay, and I'm happy to assist if needed, but usually they've been really good in getting it on the agenda, is my understanding. Okay, any questions on this?
I move to approve the vote to request the Select Board to delegate authority to the school committee.
Second.
Motion by Meg, second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, and so it carries. The next item on the agenda, policy JRD, publication of students' photographs and images. Second reading, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, yes, you will recall we saw this several weeks ago, and I think it came about because we had no policy that was covering ESY, even though we have students who are taught in our schools during the summertime. So we looked at this policy, and when we brought it forth, we realized that there was some language in here that had existed for a very long time, and it was a language that I think probably made sense when someone was actually writing this, but given the notion that the words public domain mean something else legally, it didn't really make sense anymore. And so you can see that what we've done is we have stricken all of that language in there, and it has been rewritten by the school's legal counsel to indicate that when a student is off-site or at a sporting event, for example, which I think is what the old language public domain was referring to. So, for example, if we took the ESY kids off to the YMCA camp and they were swimming in the pool and someone else took a picture of them, we have no legal authority over what happens in that setting. Or even if we have a student who's playing in a Hopkinton High School basketball game on a Friday night, we really have no legal authority over that setting. So say the newspaper takes a picture of a student and puts the student biggest life on, the front page of the newspaper. That's not within, our responsibility. We are responsible for the students, though, when they are in our buildings every day. And the only other thing that this says is if a student is in the ESY program and we take a photograph and we use it, we simply can't label that as part of the ESY program because you can never, obviously, label that a student has particular special needs. So, Jen and I did read through this again last Friday morning, and we seem to be happy with the revisions as you see them on this sheet. My recollection was that CPAC had some comments at the last meeting. Was there any comments? Because I know it went out by listserv. Any comments from either CPAC or anybody else? We haven't heard from anyone on this particular policy.
When did this go out on listserv? Would you know, Dr. Kavanaugh?
This week. Was it this week?
This week.
Years ago.
It's a couple of days ago. I think we should give some more time to folks perhaps, because there was so much conversation around it, to give them that time to read through this a little bit. Meg, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but as the CPAC liaison, did you hear anything from the CPAC community on this?
I heard a little whisper yesterday that, oh yes, this is coming back, have any changes been made? But I think people have been so preoccupied with the special town meeting and then the hearing we did last week that it might be an idea to give people more time. And I just had one question for clarification, if you don't mind. Is it possible to submit the form online instead of signing it and returning it, a paper form?
I'm sure we could make that happen.
I think that would make it so much easier for parents. Especially parents like me who are utterly discombobulated most of the time. Just checking off a box online would be much better. Thank you.
And was there a final decision made on the opt-in versus opt-out? I couldn't quite gather that.
Students would opt out.
Okay.
In the same way that students do, for the regular school year. It seems to me in reading this that the biggest change was clarifying that ESY students, that nothing about students' disability
That's right.
information would be included in the photographs. I think that maybe was part of what generated response last time, was the concern that children would be identified as being disabled in photos, which clearly they're not.
Yes.
That's right.
And the other phrase that was problematic was the term public domain. Exactly.
Right.
And so that just got nixed completely and basically redefined for what it really is. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll bring that back.
You'd like to bring it back, so we'll bring it back on January 2nd.
Does that sound okay? January 2nd, right after the holidays?
Yeah.
But from you all, we'll leave it as is, or do you think that it needs any, I mean, are you comfortable with it as is unless we hear otherwise from the community?
I was comfortable with it as
Okay.
is, as long as.
So we don't need to
Yeah.
adjust, just bring it back
Yeah,
unless
I
we
mean,
hear.
if there is, we should be able to communicate that, right?
Right.
Just to play the other side of this, do we want to wait until the meeting after that, just because we've been so busy right now? It doesn't seem like an immediately pressing need, and people
Yes.
between now and January 2nd are going
I
to be.
agree.
Absolutely, and January 2nd really is not something I like for any kind of meeting.
And when is ESY's, is it March that they sign up for it?
Yeah.
So we have time,
We
okay,
have
all right,
time.
okay.
Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, policy JBD, gender identity support, second reading, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Yes, so we really didn't change any of the original language in this policy, but what we did do was we took the advice of the students who had come to hear the first reading of the policy last time. They had expressed interest in seeing information in this policy about changing facilities, locker rooms, restrooms, and so what we did was we simply added the language that is on the DESI website that, sort of complies with the regulations in Massachusetts. It's really verbatim.
It is pulled from, yeah.
Super.
It's great.
It's a good
It
policy.
looks great. I think the students who came out supported it fully.
It's really nice.
Was there any further circling back with them on this, did you say?
So, interestingly, when this was sent out via listserv earlier, Lisa Winter, who is a teacher here at the high school, did let me know that she might have some students who would come here tonight just to sort of see this policy through. But she did also say that it's a tough time of year for them to do. So I spoke with her today about it. It did not seem that anyone had any problems with it, the way that it was written right now. But if you wanted to put this off to the 9th as well, we could certainly do that, or we could vote for it tonight.
I'd be comfortable putting this through tonight. I think this reflects exactly what we heard from the population that is closest to this, so.
It'd be nice to put it into play. And if there is anyone who's uncomfortable with any of it, I mean, it can always be changed later on, but we don't have this policy.
Right.
So to
Yes.
put it into play as soon as is possible, as long as there aren't strong objections from anyone in the community or here, I think it would be a good idea.
It's a gap,
With you.
yeah.
And the words that,
Gap.
It is, yeah.
and the words that they're going to come here to see it pass through gives us that feeling that's supportive, right? Right behind how it's worded.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's what everyone would have thought. You know what I mean?
Right.
We haven't heard from them, so I think that they'll probably be like almost 201 comfortable with it. So, I mean, it is what they asked for and it's what the law dictates, so.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion to move this policy as presented in the second reading.
So moved.
Second.
So motion by Nancy, second by Meg. All those in favor?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, and so it carries. And, I realized, I think in error, we were having that item called future agenda items. I think that got missed out in error. But in terms of future agenda items, are there any ideas, thoughts?
I've seen some conversation in social media about how Legacy Farms monies have been
It's a large
reimbursed.
conversation today.
A bit of a large conversation. So I was just wondering if we could have a report come back to school committee about, it's confusing to everybody.
It would be from the town, you mean?
Well, we could, actually, both would be nice. A joint report would be wonderful, but at least for starters, where were the enrollment points that would trigger
I have some of that
an
for you.
action? Okay, and then it'd be nice to see it as a slide so that people could really digest it. And then, so what monies are owed to us? I think there's some conversation out there about that and what have we received, which, so far.
That's great. Any other thoughts, ideas?
That's a great idea.
The future agenda, okay. And I have one request, to just put that back in. I think it got missed out in error.
So your request is to add future agenda
Items on the agenda.
Just to clarify.
Yes,
The future
yes. Time for public comments.
Oh, did you want me to do the capacity study?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I guess I'm looking at two different agenda items, like, look
I don't
look
see it on
here.
either one, though. It's really.
Right, I don't see it on this one.
Two different
I
open.
have it on mine.
You do?
Yeah.
I do.
do
I
you-
did a minute ago. Oh, here it is, right, it's right, it was till I clicked the wrong thing.
I think it's because of the revision.
Right here.
I have it.
D,
You do?
under the.
Sorry.
Oh, it is there.
Yes, I see it now.
It's really close to the bottom.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like
See,
right
I
above
had
public
this one.
comment. Sorry.
It didn't have that. Okay. Moving on to,
All right, I'll just zip through this very quickly because I'm wondering if, we did this so quickly last week that I wonder if there are questions that, people continue to have at home. I did include the questions that came on the note cards because if people asked about them, they should be getting responses to them. Some of them were just comments, so I didn't quite put them in there. So I know that people are thinking, so now you've got that capacity study, what are you going to do with it? And, we've gotten the bad news from MSBA, and so I think that, we're in a place now where we have to consider what has been predicted about enrollment, and we have to plan accordingly for that. And, unfortunately, we don't have that MSBA immediate reimbursement, and I think we have to look at that. Like, what is it going to look like? We've just put $10 million into 14 classrooms. That's an awful lot of money. I think that we're lucky to have a little bit of time to determine whether or not those enrollment numbers are going to actually play out. Arthur Wagman was at last week's, what is it? I can't think of it.
public hearing.
Public hearing, that's what I'm
Yes.
thinking, yep. And, he said it's really, he calls it catching smoke, but at some point, you have a year and then another year and then another year to see how many of these things, the predictions are actually coming to be. I think that we need to look at our study and think about what parts of that study are people in this community actually interested in pursuing. So if we think, that you could have an amazing 2 to 5 school, is that something the community is interested in? Moving everybody who is 6 to 12 onto this side of Hayden Row Street, does that actually make sense for our community? We have to take a look at all of our physical plants and how those relate to academic programming. And then I think I would say in the next year, we have to really think about what a comprehensive 10-year plan is going to look like for the Hopkinton Public Schools. So just taking a look again at enrollment information, we give you number after number after number. From July 1st to December 1st, our net gain is 166. If we look at the October SIMS report in 2015 to the October SIMS report in 2019, it's 399 students. We have the actual enrollment over time, and so if you start up there, and I've shown this slide many times, with kindergarten starting at 198, by the time those kids are in 10th grade, they are a number of 291 students. And I'm showing this again because I had so many people ask me questions about that algorithm and about, how does the life of a cohort actually exist. So you can see the growth in a cohort from 198 to 291. As you go across and you see grade 2 at 253, you can see that they grew to 299. And at some point, my guess is that grade 2 cohort was probably significantly smaller in kindergarten, because as you're looking at those kindergarten numbers, you don't really see anything that looks like 253. Right. And we know that the year marathon opened, we expected to have about 204 students, and you can see on that slide that we had 260. So 60 kids more than we anticipated. So we do have that cohort model. It gets bigger, rarely gets smaller.
It gets bigger faster, too.
It gets bigger faster, too, now, absolutely.
Versus 10 years, or some are 6 years, there's 100 more kids. That's crazy.
Yes. So you can see our projected enrollment numbers, and so people have asked me, what about the algorithm? Is that going to actually sustain? How did you get to these numbers? What's your confidence levels? And I think that my confidence levels in these are high. But again, there's no way for us to know that this will actually become the growth of the Hopkinton Public Schools. What we can say is that when we used to do the growth predictions in Hopkinton, we used only those first 2 bullets. And even at town meetings, someone was asking these questions, how do you know, how do you know, how do you know? The first two bullets are things that we always use. We use the birth rate data, and we use the cohort survival methodology. So the 198 became 291. In this particular study, we also had new housing developments taken into consideration, and that was not just, new housing developments, but what kind of construction is it? Is it a condo complex? Is it single-family homes? Is it single-family homes with 4 bedrooms? What does that look like? And how frequently are those things being built, right? Are we going to build out 100 homes this year, 10 homes this year? The person who conducted this study for us also looked at resales and talks about in-out migration. If you take a look at my little stick figure at the bottom, what you see in those yellow call-out boxes are the actual questions that people asked at our public hearing last week. So do the projections account for aging homeowners who will sell their homes to younger families? And I will say that the answer to that is yes. He sort of looked at that median age of a person in Hopkinton. At this point in time, it's declining. The average age here is getting, and the median age is getting younger. So that might be an indicator that folks are selling their homes and younger families are moving in. Was the same algorithm used as when we were voting on legacy farms? I don't know what algorithm was used then, but we do have an algorithm now, but it's enhanced with additional data. And the last piece of additional data is just the open land. Right? There is still land in this community that would be likely to be developed for housing. So that's what contributes to it.
I was curious, did Dr. Wagman give us the algorithm so that we can plug in new numbers?
No, I can ask him for that.
I mean, if there's a formula,
Yeah.
and there are variables, and the variables don't actually prove to be the same as what he entered, it'd be nice to work with that over time.
It typically, I remember asking that question, here at the school committee meeting and also the public hearing. When we talk about the confidence level, those are the analytical models that carry that built within them. So when you put in that data, they will tell you, is it a 95% confidence interval, or is it a 97 or a 99? So it's usually 95 and up, that kind of a confidence interval. Now, I would imagine that all of this would be proprietary for them in terms of, the input that they put in and what the input is what they're gathering from here. But the output, when it comes out, as I had said at that meeting, my hope is that after putting all this money that we put in and all the effort and requesting all of our town partners to provide this data, it is not fair that at least in the near future, next year, the accuracy is way off. If it is within a 5% range, it's one thing, but to be off by 100%, 150% is not fair. I would like my money back. I will tell you that.
So other things that he considers as he's doing the work is, when you take a look at the birth rate data, we were always hovering in that 118 to 133 range until 2016, where you get to 159, 2017, 176, 2018, 147, and 2019, it's 149, and he's extrapolated that number out to get to that. We have the 2017 master plan. Hopkinton has developed new rentals, condo complexes, single-family homes, so all of that has been considered. He takes into consideration that back in 2007, 2008, only 27 building permits were issued in each one of those years, and in 2016, 385 building permits were issued. The realtors who are selling people's homes in this community are telling us that somewhere around 80% of their clients are saying that they moved to Hopkinton for the schools, and the overall population of Hopkinton has gone from 14,925 in 2010 to 17,974 in 2018. All of that kind of stuff has been put into this study. And there's much more. I just sort of picked out the salient ones. And I know that I've shown this slide as well before, but the guesstimate for next year is a net gain of about 234 students.
Dr. Kavanaugh, when we met at the last school committee meeting, the chart that we saw where the net gain numbers we felt were a little different than what I had been thinking. I just want to understand that when the projections are made, are they the net gain or are they the gross? And what all does that number include?
I think that we've been looking at the ins and not taking out the outs, but when we take out the outs, we're at about 167 since June right now, July 1st to December 1st.
I also think the other number we've been talking about that was 250 something, if you look at what the enrollment was on September 1st of 2018 versus what it is now, it gets you to that number that we have been discussing.
Yes, that is true. And I think another thing that we have to take into account is when we look at a school year's growth, we have to remember that if you think about that school year starting on July 1, it's going to go all the way to June 30th, right? So it just keeps creeping up. And one of the things that you see is, a lot of house closings happen at the end of months. So by the time we get to January 31st, we'll have like a good little chunk that comes in then as well.
The 234 is what we're expecting on September 1, correct? Not what we're expecting on June 30th.
No, I think in the period between July 1, 2020 and June 30th, 2021.
Okay.
In 1 year's time, you would expect to enroll 234
But
kids.
that's not including what we're going to get between now and July 1.
Correct. Right.
That was the estimate of the 104, correct?
Yes.
From last year, which was that all extra algorithmic work that was done by NESDEC.
Yes.
And so my understanding was that the 104 was the estimate through the end of the year and that we were already at 270. But what I'm hearing is that as of now, it's 160. I just would like that clarity. I don't want to throw numbers and throw things off. Just want to be clear, because there are also the out-of-districts and the vocational. So there are two aspects to consider when we are talking about space, the physical space. We need to think about kids here in the buildings. And then you have the overall budget picture that would have to include the out-of-districts, Keep Tech, and all those other aspects. So I just want that clarity for my sake and for everyone's sake.
Yeah, and when we think about the Norfolk Aggie, Keefe Tech, out-of-district kids, I don't even know that they get to 100. That's a very, very low number.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so the yellows are the questions that folks asked. The first one I've already answered, what's your confidence level in the projected growth? I'm thinking it's pretty good, actually. Will building permits be limited until the school expansion takes place? And I just say that one's a town question, it's not a school question. Can we expect to see new programs that the schools will offer? And I think that we are always trying to grow our programs. And so even though, tonight we talked about no new programs, but we really do have CVTE, we have STEAM, so we do have those programs, but we've been funding those with grants, to be truthful. Will there be an expansion to Marathon? I didn't see that in the capacity study, and from hearing Mrs. DeBoe tonight that at some point, yes, there's going to have to be, right? We're already emptying out health rooms and art rooms to put students in there. What is your vision on making technology more available in the classrooms? And one of the things that I will say is it's really easy to add technology when you're in the midst of a building project, because you can do all of that infrastructure work, and a lot of times those devices can be part of the new school purchase, right? What were the enrollment projections for the last couple of years, and what were the actuals? And so Georgette and I tried to pull out some of those old NESDEC paperwork today, and I'll tell you, even looking at the NESDEC paperwork is a little bit confusing. Yeah, because there's different numbers in different places. But you can see that regardless of what was projected, we have been in 18, 19, 19, 20, and then in 2021, we're going to be, I think, much further along, really, than where we thought we would have been. What did we learn about our facilities with that capacity study? So I wanted to revisit this because I don't want people to be confused. When you look at that diagram, And it will tell you that if you have purple, blue, or green, you're going to be in a really good place in terms of the size of the space. So if you're looking at Hopkinton High School here, you can see that things like the auditorium, the cafeteria, this library, too small, right, for where the number of kids in a school of this size. But when people see all the green and yellow, I'm sure they get confused and think, oh my gosh, when they see all the blues and purples, they think that's great, and when you see all the green classrooms, you probably think, I can't imagine why there's a problem. Well, the problem isn't that the classroom size itself is too small. The problem is that there are not enough of those classrooms. So I just want to keep clarifying that for people at home.
Well, okay, I just have to say something, because I went to the concerts for the high school, and I looked at that blue stage, and I said, yeah, I don't know about this. So I took a picture, which I'm happy to share, of the band trying to fit on the stage, which is deemed
But the audience.
significantly over, I can't read that, but significantly, I'm not sure why it's significant, because it's 10%, but whatever, significantly oversized. The student musicians barely fit. Literally, I was worried about Mr. Hay tumbling backwards off the stage. He had about 2 feet. I mean, they were literally, one was, I think, the flag on her head, like at the side, and the other, they were barely fitting, and this is the concert band. So I worry about, I don't know what exactly led to that being blue. I'm not sure how that thought process went, but it is, the reality for Hopkinton is that is absolutely not blue.
And not all the classes can fit in the auditorium. Is that correct?
Oh my goodness, there are 2 classes in this building right now that could not actually
And we
fit
know,
as a
looking
whole
at the
class.
projections, pretty soon none of them will be able to fit in there.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and
Which
I
is-
think, when we look at that stage, we have a huge number of musicians, an inordinate number of musicians.
Which is really awesome.
It's an awesome problem to have, but you're right, that shouldn't be blue given our situation.
Right. So that's why I don't know, I wouldn't want the community to look at the blue. If you don't have a kid in high school, you might not realize, or if you don't have a kid at Elmwood or whatever, you might not realize what the blue, how the blue plays out in our population.
And the ability of the parents to sit in there,
Oh, yeah.
to
forget-
watch their kids perform on stage.
And, and honestly, things like the auditorium, the concerts are so wonderful. I would love the seniors to come and other community members. I mean, it's great music and very uplifting to see how people spend their time. So there's a community impact of some of these group spaces as well. So I just take some of the color coding with a little bit of a grain of salt as we look at how we in Hopkinton use the space.
Well, if you think the blue on that stage is bad, do you see the band room, the red at the bottom?
Yes.
You should go in there at some point.
Oh, I've been in
Mr.
there.
Hay is actually rehearsing with a group of kids. It's packed in there.
So that says to me that perhaps we have a higher number than other districts of kids participating in musical programs. Is that?
Oh, I would say that's very true here, yes.
But again,
Which is nice.
we serve as a MICA host site. We have for a long time, and that was something that was built up by Mr. Guevara, and we're very proud of that. So we're inviting bands from all around the state to come compete here. And we may have a large number, but I'm sure we're not the only district that has a lot of musicians. I would like to continue, I'm very proud that we are a MICA site. I'd like to continue to be that. So, again, I think this is a third-party view, and I think, it's interesting for us to maybe look more closely at the schools we're close to right now and kind of get our own assessment of what we think.
Yes, I mean, that's what MSBA would tell you was appropriate, square footage for this purpose in a high school with that many kids.
But it is an interesting point because they're not looking at us. They're looking
Right.
at a generalization across however many thousands of
Yes.
square footage studies. So if someone took the time to actually look at us, they would see what you're talking about.
Our sort of our values, what we value in
Right.
town, our priorities, yeah.
And that's where, we speak to the fact that that's what, if you were to do a building project, that's what the MSBA would do reimbursement for. However, as a community, you would say, but we need that plus X.
Right.
And that just becomes non-reimbursable.
Yeah.
So it's not that it can't be done, it's just 2 sides to the formula,
Right. It's gonna cost
using MSBA.
It's a good point.
Okay, so here's the marathon school. You can see that, and this is probably a very good depiction of what MSBA would do. So the green are our classrooms at Marathon, and that tells you that those are just the right size for pre-K, K, and 1 classrooms, right? Because that's what they'll fund, are classrooms the size of the ones that we have in the Marathon School. What it also shows you is that right now, our cafeteria is too small already in Marathon. It's terrible, isn't it? Yeah. And I've just included these last couple things because I want to point out to the community that what you saw on those slides were really options. So the Teachers Association said, can we talk about this? And I said, of course we can talk about this because, when we even think about some of the things that might be happening on this side of Hayden Row, or at least the way it was painted up there, that could be 7, 8, 9, 10 years out. What we're really trying to do is develop some kind of plan that has some structure to it. This was the drawing that they had done for us of what it would look like if we put a great big 2-3 our core 4-5 school so that you can sort of consolidate your services there. And again, options. And, oops, oh yes, and here's where I tell the part that we were not invited into the MSBA for reimbursement.
Cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, it is now. And then the last little bit of options is just that really nice addition that they've shown to Hopkins School, where you have science and black box theaters and regular classrooms and additional administration space and a bigger kitchen and a bigger cafeteria. So a lot can be done with that building. Again, options. All right, and then the last question, and I know this is
There it is.
Yes, I know. The hot button item, what is happening with the Legacy Farms money? So I did put this slide together so that people could see. And that might be hard to read, but I'll kind of walk you through it. So that very first invoice for Legacy Farms, it came in October of 2018. In October of 2018, our SIMS report said we had 325 students. So when we hit 250, we were going to get $500,000. So once we built the developer for the $500,000, that dollar amount was paid to the town of Hopkinton. And you'll remember we put it into a stabilization fund, and now we just took it out so that we could do the engineer design study for this building. So that first 250, all set. For whatever reason, and I don't know the answer to this, 266 is where we start the counting. So for every increment of 30 over 266, there is supposed to be an incremental billing point. So when we got to March of 2019, our SIMS report said 342 students. And then when we got to October of 2019, our SIMS report said 441 students. So starting at 266 and adding increments of 30, you can see that we can go all the way out to 416 and add 5 different increments of 30. And if we take that 441 and we subtract the 416, as of our October SIMS report, we were already 25 more students toward another increment of 30, if that makes sense. So when we were in October, the second invoice was sent to the developer, and that invoice was in the amount of $831,300. And then in November, a third invoice was sent, and that was for $1,246,950. So there's currently an outstanding balance of $2,078,250. And that's based on 441 students that were reported in our October 2019 SIMS.
So that's not an increment, that's an addition, right? So the 831, we didn't just send an invoice out for the $1.2 million because it went up, approximately $400,000. It's adding those two numbers together.
Well, what I think happened was in March of 2019, when we hit 342, If we did 266, you would have gone to 296 and then 326. So you would have two increments, which was billed, I think, in October of 2019. And then when we got to
1 month later?
No, when we got to the October, right, but you are right about the billing schedule. When we got to the October 2019 SIMS report, we had gone to 266, to 296, to 326. So then we would have also gone to 356, 386, 416. And that's when we sent out another three increments. So 831.3 would have been two increments, and 1,246,950 would have been three increments. And if the numbers don't quite match in terms of a ratio, it's because the amount that is associated with each increment of 30 grows a teeny weeny little bit more exponentially each time.
So,
No, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead,
Amanda.
Nina. I just, I vaguely remember language just in the agreement that payments are due at the end of the fiscal year? Or is it counts by the end of the fiscal year? There was some thing about the end of the fiscal year as a key time marker. What was that?
It's the student count at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
The problem is, we haven't been paid yet.
Correct. Yes,
So that the
March would have been last fiscal year
the-
then.
831 is late, is that
That's
correct?
That's right.
And they've been billed for the $1.2 million, and we also haven't received that, but the 831 was actually due at the end of the fiscal year.
8/31 was due July 1.
Do you have any sense from the town of when we could expect that? Just, I know last year we got it in the middle of January, is that right?
It
From the
was
2018.
It was received in the fall, however, there was discussion on how to.
To get it into the school. Okay, correct.
Gotcha.
So, you said that the 831 was due on July 1st?
Yes.
So when we say the second invoice was sent in October, that means was that a reminder sent in October?
I actually have copies of those invoices. I can look in a moment. But it seems to me that
Separate
what that is
invoices.
saying is that the invoice was actually sent in October.
Okay, so we just sent it? Is that how I'm understanding it, in
It
October?
went out late, is that?
It went in.
Guessing that might be
So,
true. We don't send the invoice.
Yeah,
It goes from town
through
hall.
the town, so we report to the town,
I see.
and so the control over the actual billing is not in our hands.
I see. So the invoice was sent 2 months ago and a month ago for the third invoice, is that right?
I haven't seen the invoice.
Okay. And I think, again, tying this back to our agenda item on the capacity study a little bit here. Is it that we are looking to see how this could be utilized for the overall bigger project plan related to the growth? Just trying to tie it back to the capacity study conversation a little bit. I do think that we need to talk with our town partners and share the fact that, it's all very clear, the need and the ask. We are certainly going to have those conversations on January 2nd.
Yes.
But also that there is this outstanding amount that we should be looking to secure.
It was billed on October 9th, 2019.
October 9th?
Yeah, 2000, that's when the 831 went out.
Okay. Okay, so slightly over 2 months ago. And the November one also?
I think
it's okay.
11/15, yeah.
Okay, so about a month ago.
Yeah.
All right, but I don't know, I think there's a process that gets delayed or what have you, but that's a huge chunk of money.
It is.
That is in balance, and our need is right here. We're asking for all of this, and I recall us saying that whatever monies we are able to secure in, through the stabilization fund, we kept it open enough that we could utilize it as needed during the year for not just capital items, but some of the other growth-related needs like teachers. So that's another source of funding for us to consider.
Also, the town could be collecting interest on that money.
Well, also, I think we need to receive it, in order to have it allocated, we need to
Yes.
receive it in advance of town meeting in May.
Right.
Yes. Yes,
Otherwise, we have to
absolutely.
wait to either another special town meeting or another town meeting. Otherwise, it doesn't get into our
The
fund.
town would also be accruing interest on it if it was in the town's accounts, which,
Absolutely.
I mean,
Even if it weren't in
even if it wasn't in our
ours,
hand, the
yeah.
town would be getting some money for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
that's a big, that's like $100,000 worth of
I'm going to
interest
guess
right
if
there.
I owed that kind of money to the town.
Dr. Kavanaugh, if you don't mind going back up a little bit on the slides where you had the drawings a little bit.
Yes.
A little bit before this, the options.
Yes.
So I have received a couple of comments that I would like to share. One is the fact that, building another school on Hayden Row without having another passage or another way of entry was a concern that I have heard from some of the folks who are living off of Hayden Row. So I would hope that if we were to look at that option in the future, and I know there's a lot of work to get to that point even, that we look at many alternate ways of getting to that site. And we know how difficult that road can be with all the congestion that we have seen. And I think there will have to be a lot of collaboration between the building that needs to be done and the work that needs to be done on the roads, perhaps. So I think that's one consideration. Another email that I received was from a community member who said she's very supportive of the immediate needs, that it's absolutely needed. It's very clear from growth standpoint. However, from the longer term, she shared some concerns that, is all that build out necessary? So just sharing it, the commentary that I have heard. I would think that in the upcoming months, we strategize a little bit as to how we can involve. It was great when at the public hearing, I saw a young man get up and speak and share his views. I appreciated all the teachers who came up and talked about, their very real concerns. I also heard people who talked about building up zoning. I think there are so many stakeholders in this process, including school committee members, that I would hope that as we continue to work on this important work, we bring all the necessary stakeholders and strategize what are the other methods and what are the options we could look at, and how could we do it in a sustainable fashion, both from an environment, ecological aspect, but also from a financial aspect. Long term, my friends at the senior center were not happy today when I visited them. They were very supportive, many of them, they're so generous and they support our schools, but they were very unhappy with the fact that, they're feeling the pain of the tax increases, and they are saying, your driving is away. It's very hard to sustain this. So I just want us to keep that in perspective. I'm not saying it's this or that. I don't think that's what it is. We just keep that fiscal responsibility in mind, and when we are building, it's the entire community, and I'm so appreciative of the support they've given so far.
I hope you shared with them the debt service piece, because that will impact any building project that we do. That
Oh, absolutely,
Mr.
absolutely.
Catino was talking, and Mr. Hurst said as
Absolutely.
well, and Mr. O'Leary, about how
Absolutely.
that will mitigate the pain.
And I will share my faux pas. I shared it with Dr. Kavanaugh. There was a gentleman who, the conversation around, it's a lot for the community right now with all the change and the transition. This was around the downtown corridor project. And I said, but we're only paying only $3 million. And he did not appreciate that. He said, I don't think you're on fixed income. And so I'm just saying that we have a cross-section in the community, and absolutely the debt schedule is what helps us make these kinds of decisions. The things are falling off of
Will
that.
hopefully help us.
Right? I know I said that in my statement to the Independent as well, that really helped us convince a lot of our senior voters and a lot of other voters that it's coming down with the growth and need is real. So again, bringing it back to the next steps here, I'd like us to strategize a little bit as to what this looks like. I was really excited with the idea of the 1, 2, 3, 4, the way you had explained it, the possibility of some commonalities there, some shared services. I thought that was a good idea. That was something that excited me quite a bit. But I am not fully aware of some of the things that people talked about in terms of social emotional, with the 8 and 12 being in the same space. Those were some things that I would like to understand better.
Is a question, a follow-up on what you're saying, if that's okay. I would think once we get to the feasibility piece, there would be options that would be explored and the opportunity for the community to come in and discuss and weigh in, much like we had focus groups when the Marathon School, before it became the Marathon School, they looked at different ideas of how to do it, where to do it, and whatnot, and brought the community along as part of that. That would be my hope, that we would mirror that process.
And I think with the where, we're very lucky in that, you know, a lot of the open parcels were really analyzed nicely with Marathon. So, like, we have a lot of data that's sort of leftover data. So the nice part is you won't have to pay for it twice.
A lot of work ahead on this.
A lot of work ahead.
I think a little bit of a breather, hopefully post-January, but there's so much work just with the portables and the high school extension. I'm actually very excited about the high school extension. I'm just looking forward to that coming to fruition too.
I was here today, and I think, you know, just jibber-jabbered with a couple teachers who were also very excited about it.
Yeah, and, you know, just to round it off, I think the pain is real for some of the folks who are on fixed income or low income. At the same time, I also heard the comments, the kids are here. We need to support it. So just saying what we are going through as a community. But again, ending the meeting tonight with the very fact that we did get 10 million approved with an overwhelming majority. So that's a huge plus for us. And it shows the commitment of the community in education and the fact that how much we value education, kids, teachers, and the entire team. So on that note, since this is the last meeting of the end of this year, I'd like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, any holiday that you celebrate. Happy holidays and a very Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Thank you. And just, yes, we don't have any public, so I'm assuming no public comments there. And items by consensus. Dr. Cavanaugh.
As superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved. Motion by Jen.
Second.
Second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Looking for a motion for adjournment now.
So moved.
Motion by Jen. Second. Second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Our next meeting will be on January 2nd, right here at the high school library. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bob.